Audie Murphy. Remember that name, for it belongs to a man whose incredible story will shatter all your perceptions of what's possible. Have you ever felt too insignificant, too weak to stand against the world? Did you think circumstances had made you a walking mistake, incapable of great achievements? What if I told you that these very flaws could become your most formidable weapon? How did a boy, rejected by everyone he wanted to serve, single-handedly destroy an entire company of enemies? And how did his poverty and hunger transform him into a killing machine that changed the course of history? This story begins not with the thunder of battles, but with quiet desperation. Not with heroic deeds, but with a struggle for every scrap of food. It's the tale of how, one day in June 1942, a young man, barely 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing no more than 110 pounds, stepped into a U.S. Marine Corps recruitment office. He was too small, too frail. The recruiter, without even looking up, merely scoffed derisively. The Navy. They rejected him. Army paratroopers sent him home to grow up. He seemed useless, like a malfunctioning P-38 unable to maneuver. By all military standards, he was a nobody. But the recruiters made a fatal mistake. They saw only a boy, not the formidable weapon forged by poverty. They didn't see the cold glint of a hunter in his eyes, a hunter who had saved his family from starvation for 5 long years. That boy's name was Audie Murphy, and in just 30 months, this youth, rejected due to his physique, would become a one-man army who would single-handedly destroy an entire German company by climbing onto a burning tank mere seconds from exploding. Stay with us and watch till the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscribe. And of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. His story doesn't begin on blood-soaked battlefields. It originates in the merciless poverty of the cotton fields of Hunt County, Texas. Audie was the 6th of 12 children. His father, an impoverished sharecropper, abandoned the family. His mother died of pneumonia shortly after Audie turned 16. Suddenly, this 110-pound youth became the head of the family, the sole provider for his younger siblings. His primary tool was a .22 caliber rifle. His driving force was hunger. A neighbor later recalled Murphy's astonishing marksmanship. The boy could drop a running rabbit at 50 yards with a rifle most people couldn't hit a barn with. Murphy's own words were far more chilling. "If I don't hit what I'm shooting at, my family doesn't eat tonight." This wasn't training. This was survival. Every bullet cost money the family didn't have. Every miss meant empty stomachs. Under such pressure, Audie Murphy didn't just learn to shoot. He learned to kill. He developed a marksman's eye, a cold efficiency that would one day terrify German soldiers across 3 countries. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Murphy saw his chance. The Army promised a stable salary, 3 square meals, and money he could send home. But he was still 16 and still too thin. After being scoffed at by every other military branch, he went to the regular Army infantry. The recruiter looked at a forged affidavit from his sister claiming he was 18. He looked at the boy, who looked closer to 14. He sighed and stamped the papers. The U.S. Army had no idea what it had just done. It had just accepted a field modification that would save hundreds of American lives by breaking all the rules. Private First Class David Moyeu, who trained with Murphy, recalled, "We all thought he was a mascot. The drill sergeants mercilessly teased him, called him the runt. But then they got to the firing range. Those blue eyes turned cold as winter. He never missed. Not once." In July 1943, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment landed in Sicily. In the mountains, Murphy's hidden truth finally emerged. His rural upbringing meant he moved silently. He used the terrain. He shot with deadly cold precision. Near Palermo, his unit was pinned down by a German machine gun. This was his first serious challenge. Doctrine said, "Wait for support." Murphy's doctrine said, "My family doesn't eat." While the others took cover, Private Murphy, the 110-pound runt, used the terrain to single-handedly flank the enemy position. He destroyed the entire crew with grenades. Then, in a move that defined his subsequent career, he turned their own machine gun on the retreating forces. Captain Paul Harris recommended him for the Bronze Star, writing, "This soldier demonstrates an extraordinary natural aptitude for combat, which is exceptional." Exceptional was an understatement. Audie Murphy had just discovered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was exceptionally good at killing. Sicily was only the beginning. The Italian campaign is where Murphy transformed from a good soldier into a walking nightmare for the Wehrmacht. Stay with us and watch till the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscribe. And of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Oh, at the Volturno River in October 1943, his unit was overwhelmed by a German counterattack. Instead of retreating, Murphy grabbed a borrowed sniper rifle and single-handedly held the position. 5 German soldiers were killed from over 300 yards away. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal in the army, which only underscored his exceptional abilities. He was no longer just a soldier. He had become a force to be reckoned with. Staff Sergeant William Paulson described Murphy's method. Murph didn't fight in anger. That's what was terrifying about him. He fought coldly, calculatingly, as if doing arithmetic. See a German, destroy a German, move on to the next German. No emotion, no hesitation, just deadly efficiency. These words reveal the essence of his relentless pursuit. Each enemy destroyed was merely a step toward the next, creating a continuous flow of action. Then came Anzio, the blood-soaked beachhead Winston Churchill called a wildcat. And here, Murphy faced one of the greatest threats to infantry, a German tank. But he didn't just fire his bazooka. He crawled toward the tank, using the terrain until he was at point-blank range. This audacious maneuver allowed him to completely destroy the German vehicle. For this feat, he was awarded his first Silver Star. He survived Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, and Rome. He was wounded, but continued to fight and was promoted to sergeant. This too-small country boy now had a reputation that preceded him, with each action becoming a precursor to the next, even more incredible feat. But in August 1944, a test came that changed everything and became the pinnacle of his combat career. Near Montélimar, France, his platoon was ambushed. The problem, his lieutenant, his immediate commanding officer, was killed in the first volley. The chain of command was broken, but Sergeant Murphy didn't wait for orders. He became the order. He took command of the platoon. The situation was hopeless. 18 Americans against a German company of over 100 men. For 2 hours, Sergeant Murphy held a critically important crossroads. He directed his men, exposed himself to fire, and personally eliminated 15 enemies. He held the defense, demonstrating inhuman resilience and strategic thinking. The Army, finally realizing what a unique soldier it had, commissioned him as an officer on the battlefield. On October 14, 1944, the boy who was too small to enlist now became Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy. His story is a vivid example of how a man seemingly destined for defeat becomes a legend. Have you ever felt cornered, as if everything is against you and finding a way out seems impossible, when the world is crumbling and there's no strength left to resist? Many of us have experienced moments when hope flickered, when it seemed time to give up. But what if I told you that even in the most desperate circumstances, when the odds are stacked against you, one person can turn everything upside down? Today we will delve into a story that will force you to rethink the limits of human endurance. A story about a soldier who single-handedly faced an entire army doing what seemed unthinkable. You will learn about 3 key moments that transformed an ordinary 19-year-old into a legend. And the first of them will shock you to your core. How could one man change the tide of an entire battle? What compels a soldier to face certain death for others? And can each of us find the same unwavering will within ourselves? Audie Murphy, a name that became synonymous with unimaginable courage. However, every war has its monstrous price. By January 1945, Murphy was long past being the 16-year-old teenager he was when he arrived at the front. He was only 19, but his haggard face and vacant stare made those around him assume he was 40. He had witnessed the death or injury of almost all his comrades. He had personally eliminated over 100 enemy soldiers, and now he was about to challenge the Colmar Pocket itself. This area of French land remained the Wehrmacht's last stronghold, which Adolf Hitler had ordered held at all costs. For this purpose, the best of the best had been transferred there. The 2nd Mountain Division, elite troops, hardened veterans of harsh Norwegian winters, specifically designated for this decisive offensive. For Company B, the situation wasn't just desperate, it had long crossed the line into hopelessness. Just look at these terrifying numbers. In merely 5 days of continuous bloody fighting, the company had lost 102 men. Of the original 187, all officers, except Murphy himself, were either killed or evacuated. Only 40 combat-ready soldiers remained. Murphy himself, despite a fresh shrapnel wound in his leg, continued to fight, telling no one about his injury. Private Anthony Abramsky vividly described their condition with chilling accuracy. "We were exhausted to the limit, completely worn out. Most of us hadn't slept for 3 days. Half the guys had frostbite. Our machine guns were failing, freezing. We tried to dig foxholes, but the ground was hard as iron. Stay with us and watch till the end. We'd be especially grateful for your like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from." January 26, 1945 dawned dim, grey, and piercingly cold, foreshadowing ill. Company B, stretched in a thin, vulnerable line, held a position along the edge of the Holzheim forest. Before them lay a mile of open, frost-bound ground, an utterly exposed landscape. They were, as Private Abramsky aptly put it, sitting ducks. Murphy positioned his only anti-tank assets, 2 M10 tank destroyers. He had 40 exhausted, half-dead men at his disposal and a field telephone line to coordinate with artillery, his last, only real hope. At 13:00, a torrential German artillery barrage began. Shells exploded in the treetops, raining down a deadly incandescent shower of metal onto the frozen ground. This hellish barrage lasted for 30 long minutes. At 13:40, the assault itself began. Private First Class Donald Ekman was the first to spot them. You could clearly see the pennants fluttering on the antennas of the German tanks, 6 vehicles, and behind them guard no fewer than 250 infantrymen, all clad in white snow camouflage, moving across the field like ghosts inexorably approaching. Murphy's first action was to immediately request artillery support. However, it became clear, artillery alone could not stop this avalanche. The German forces were too dispersed, too numerous, their advance too swift. From 600 yards, the M10 tank destroyers opened fire. Their initial shots, alas, missed their target. The crews, exhausted to the limit, felt their hands numb from the biting cold. The German tank's return fire was instantaneous and devastating. An 80mm shell struck the turret of the rear M10. The vehicle erupted in flames like a torch. The crew, miraculously escaping, scrambled into the forest. Meanwhile, the front M10, attempting to maneuver, slid into a drainage ditch. Its tracks spun desperately, but uselessly, trying to find purchase on the frozen ground. Its crew abandoned it and also retreated. The clock showed 14:20. Both tank destroyers were completely disabled. German infantry were now approaching within 200 yards. This was a critical turning point, a moment when the capture of the position seemed inevitable. It was then that Lieutenant Murphy made a decision that utterly defied all logic, common sense, and instinct for self-preservation. He ordered his remaining 40 men to retreat to pre-prepared positions deeper in the forest. "Fall back!" he shouted piercingly, his voice cutting through the din of battle. But he himself did not move back. Instead, while his soldiers hurried to cover, Lieutenant Murphy, against all odds, ran forward. He ran through a hail of artillery fire and machine gun bursts. He ran straight to the burning M10 tank destroyer. The combat vehicle's hull was fully engulfed in flames from the rear. Thick, acrid black smoke billowed from within. At any moment, thousands of rounds of ammunition and 300 gallons of gasoline inside could detonate, turning the tank destroyer into a colossal exploding bomb. Murphy didn't flinch. Without the slightest hesitation, he climbed onto this burning, potentially explosive wreck and took up position behind its .50 caliber machine gun. From this vantage point, he presented a perfect, completely exposed target, a solitary figure, clearly silhouetted against the ready-to-explode vehicle, utterly defenseless against the fire of 250 rifles and 6 tanks. Private Abramsky, observing this scene from the cover of the forest, recalled, "I saw Lieutenant Murphy climb onto the burning tank destroyer. It was the greatest display of daring and courage I had ever seen in my life." A .50 caliber Browning machine gun is, in itself, a truly destructive weapon. But in Audie Murphy's hands, it transformed into an instrument of methodical, precise destruction. The hunter's instinct, honed in the cotton fields of Texas, reawakened in him. For the next hour, this 19-year-old, weighing just over 110 pounds, became a one-man army. He didn't just fire indiscriminately, he calculated every shot. In one hand, he held a field telephone, continuously calling in artillery strikes, and in the other he pressed the trigger of the .50 caliber machine gun. He erected an impenetrable wall of steel and fire. Sergeant Elmer Broley, watching this unthinkable scene from the forest's edge, recounted, "German infantrymen came within 10 yards of Lieutenant Murphy, who was destroying them in ravines, open fields, right in the forest. Wherever he saw them, the German forces, these elite mountain troops, found themselves in a completely impossible, deadly trap. Their tanks, which were supposed to crush the American position in mere seconds, were now utterly useless. They could not advance without the support of their infantry, and their infantry was being systematically, methodically annihilated by a single, almost invisible machine gun, firing from behind a screen of black smoke." Technical Sergeant Morris Wald, observing this incredible act from the battalion command post, testified, shaken. Murphy's fire was incredibly, astonishingly effective. He wasn't just scattering bullets indiscriminately. Every shot was aimed, deadly. He was literally picking off German infantrymen as if he were at a shooting range, not a battlefield. I personally saw him mow down an entire squad that tried to flank our position. The Germans tried every possible means. They shelled the tank destroyer, trying to eliminate the indomitable shooter. A shrapnel fragment pierced Murphy's leg. It was his second wound that day. But he ignored it, paying no mind. He just kept shooting. He just kept calling for artillery. At 15:10, after 40 minutes of continuous scorching fire, the .50 caliber machine gun began to falter. He was running out of ammunition. The Germans, sensing the weakening fire, seized this critical moment. They began to rush forward with renewed vigor. Murphy, without losing a second, grabbed his carbine and began picking them off one by one. The German soldiers were now only 10 yards away. It seemed like the end. Murphy made his last, most desperate call. He ordered the artillery to fire directly on his own position. The forward observer, Lieutenant Walter Weiss Fenning, refused in horror. He knew perfectly well that such an order would mean certain death for Murphy. But Murphy shouted into the phone, his voice ringing with determination. "I am giving you a direct order. Open fire on my position immediately." Audie Murphy's silent legacy, a story the war concealed. Are you familiar with that feeling when the entire world seems to crash down on you and you stand alone, face to face with an insurmountable force? Have you ever felt your existence on the brink, with the fate of many resting on your single decision? In this video, we will uncover the incredible story of a man who experienced something similar. and even more. We will learn how one man changed the course of an entire war, why his feat was erased from history, and what truly lies behind the heroic facade. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to learn will make you rethink everything you knew about heroism and war. Many of us have faced situations where we felt cornered, when it seemed there was no way out, and all circumstances were against us. I've been there too, at that point when the world around you is crumbling, and you stand alone, trying to find some support. But believe me, even in the darkest moments, there is a path to light, and the story we will tell today is a vivid testament to that. We won't just shock you with facts. We'll show you how a person, finding themselves in a desperate situation, not only endured, but also changed the course of events. Stay with us and watch till the end, for we would be especially grateful for a like and a subscribe. And of course, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Oh, immediately. The command rang out. The first 105mm shells, like harbingers of hell, landed just 50 yards away. Each explosion shook the frozen earth, scattering shrapnel in every direction, turning the surrounding area into chaos. German infantry, caught off guard in the open, were literally blown to bits. Audie Murphy, standing atop a burning vehicle, was also in the epicenter of this fiery storm. The combination of his unrelenting fire and the artillery bursts around him finally broke the German attack. The surviving infantrymen, perhaps 100 of them, turned in a panic and fled. The tanks, deprived of support, changed course and retreated. The clock showed 3:20 p.m. After one impossible hour, the attack was finally over. Audie Murphy, his uniform scorched and blood flowing from his leg, finally dismounted the M10 tank destroyer. 10 minutes later, the tank destroyer exploded, as if to punctuate what had happened. He calmly returned to the tree line where his comrades awaited him. According to Private Abramsky, he was unnervingly calm. He asked about casualties, made sure everyone was okay, then sat down, lit a cigarette, and requested a situation report. His hands didn't even tremble. That day, Audie Murphy killed or wounded about 50 German soldiers. He single-handedly stopped a combined assault of 250 elite troops and 6 tanks. He saved his company from certain destruction and forever etched his name into history, though attempts were made to erase this fact. The battlefield after this engagement presented a scene of utter devastation. German bodies were scattered across the snow-covered fields like puppets discarded after a show. The elite 2nd Mountain Division, veterans of Norway, was in full retreat, their officers powerless to rally the soldiers for another assault. But perhaps the most shocking part of this story is the silence. In the decades after the war, historians meticulously scoured German military archives, veteran organizations, and personal diaries, searching for any German accounts of that day. They found virtually nothing. An almost complete absence of first-hand reports from those who attacked Holtz. This silence is the most compelling evidence of Audie Murphy's incredible feat. German units suffered about 50 casualties from Murphy's actions alone. Many witnesses were annihilated in that battle. But more importantly, the German war machine was built on pride and elite training. The 2nd Mountain Division had fought in Norway, Finland, and on the Eastern Front. They had seen everything, but they had never encountered anything like this. The idea that 250 of their best fighters, supported by 6 tanks, were not just routed, but humiliated by one 110-pound American boy standing on a burning tank was a tactical defeat so shameful that they simply chose to erase it from history. It was inconceivable. It didn't fit their doctrine. It didn't align with their worldview. It was a fatal flaw in their own logic. The official German war diary for that day lies. It states, "The attack on American positions near Holtz was repulsed with heavy losses. Enemy resistance was stronger than expected." Stronger than expected! It was just one man. They had encountered someone who was simply better at war than they were. and that admission broke something fundamental in their martial identity. Their tactical plan was perfect. Their equipment was superior. Their soldiers were elite. And one farm boy with a stupid idea broke it all. The hunter had suddenly become the hunted. But this is not the end of the story. What happened next, and how did this feat affect the entire war? Stay with us and watch until the end, as we'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching us from. Murphy's stand had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory. It wasn't just about saving B Company. It had an enormous strategic impact. The successful defense of the Bois de Ria forest, the very position Murphy refused to yield, broke the back of German resistance throughout Alsace. The Germans' inability to break through meant that the days of the Colmar Pocket were numbered. Holzwehr itself, the village they so desperately tried to defend, fell to the Allies the very next day. Within weeks, the entire German bridgehead west of the Rhine was completely eliminated, taking 50,000 German soldiers out of the war and freeing up Allied forces for the final offensive into Germany. This one too small farm boy had just changed the map of the war, but that's not all there is to know about him. On June 2, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria, a Lieutenant General Alexander Patch officially presented Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy with the nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor. The official citation, typically restrained in military documents, barely conveys the full reality of that day. It reads, "He was alone and subject to German fire from 3 sides. But his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to falter. For an hour, the Germans used every available weapon to destroy Second Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position." Murphy's own words were, as always, more direct and candid. When asked why he climbed onto the burning tank destroyer, why he committed this stupid act, his answer was simple and clear. "They were killing my friends." He later added, "It wasn't a heroic act. I thought, if one man can do the job, why risk the lives of others?" This was a mindset comparable to McKenna's piano wire fix. It wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about seeing a fatal problem and finding the most effective solution. But what awaited him after the war? To this day, his military record remains unsurpassed among American soldiers. He received every combat award for valor the United States Army could bestow, some of them twice. Among his 33 awards were the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He also received 5 awards from France and Belgium. The boy who was too small to be a Marine became the most decorated American soldier of World War II. The war in Europe ended. The guns fell silent. Audie Murphy returned home. He was a national hero. His face graced the cover of Life magazine. Parades were held for him. He was invited to Hollywood. He became a movie star, appearing in over 40 films, including To Hell and Back, where he played himself, bringing his own story to the screen. To the public, it was the perfect Hollywood ending, a rags-to-riches story. A poor Texas farm boy defeated the Nazis and became a rich and famous star. But Audie Murphy's story doesn't end there. Here begins the real war, the missing page we know almost nothing about. What lies behind the glow of fame? Imagine a man who stood fearlessly on a burning tank, saving his comrades, an absolute hero whose courage became legendary. Now imagine that same man returning home, terrified of the dark, sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow, and haunted not by the enemies he killed, but by those he couldn't save. What happens when the nation's greatest hero returns home, but the war never ends in his head? What is the price of fame when it hides the deepest wounds? And who becomes a pillar of support when even the strongest break? Today, we will turn a page of history you may have never seen. the story of Audie Murphy, a man whose name became synonymous with valor, but whose toughest battle unfolded in the silence of his own mind. You might think you know everything about heroes, about those who overcome incredible challenges. But are you ready to learn about the invisible scars, the demons that haunt even the most resilient? Perhaps in your own life, there have been moments when the battle seemed over, but an invisible war continued within, or you fought for those you love when they no longer could. We know that feeling too. Today, we won't just tell a story. We'll show how even the greatest heroes can be vulnerable, and how true strength often manifests not on the battlefield, but in the most unexpected places. Stay with us and watch until the end, as we'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching us from. We're very interested to know the geography of our audience. The public saw Audie Murphy as an intrepid hero, the embodiment of American valor. However, behind this facade lay a fatal flaw that the war had left deep within his soul. The man who didn't flinch on a burning tank now experienced a chilling terror of the dark. Murphy's post-war years were filled with a grueling struggle against what was then called combat fatigue, and what we clearly identify today as severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He suffered from chronic insomnia, recurring, unbearable nightmares, and hypervigilance, which led him to sleep with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He was haunted by the phantoms of the past. These were not the faces of the enemies he had killed, but those he couldn't save, and the faces of his comrades forever etched in his memory. He survived physically, but his mind never left that battlefield. Ultimately, he couldn't even find peace in his own home. Murphy moved into his garage, where he slept with the light on, as darkness brought him back to the horrors of night patrols. "I don't remember when I didn't have nightmares," Murphy wrote. "They became an integral part of my life, like breathing. It was as if a demon had possessed my body." His first marriage to actress Wanda Hendricks lasted only 16 months, a casualty of his PTSD. Hendricks later described him as having two different people within him. By day, he could be incredibly charming, cheerful, generous, but with the onset of night, he transformed into someone entirely different. He patrolled the house with a loaded weapon, reliving battles from years ago. The war for America had ended, but for Audie Murphy, it remained eternal. He fought a new, invisible enemy that couldn't be vanquished with a rifle. Despite his own unbearable difficulties, Murphy became one of the first and most significant public advocates for veterans' mental health. In the 1960s, he broke through a wall of bureaucracy. He openly spoke about his nightmares, his insomnia, his inner demons. This was truly a crazy act in the post-war era, at a time when combat fatigue was mistakenly considered a sign of weakness or cowardice. America's greatest hero stood up and publicly declared, "I suffer from this." He was once again on the front lines, pointing out a problem that engineers and politicians preferred to ignore. He wrote for the Saturday Evening Post, "What about the veteran who can't cope? What about the thousands coming back from Vietnam with the same problems?" He was no longer fighting for B Company. He was fighting for all veterans. But this time, he was not alone. In 1951, he married Pamela Archer, and this is another missing page in the legend of Audie Murphy. This is the story of another hero. Stay with us and watch until the end, as we'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us in the comments where you're watching us from. We're very interested to know the geography of our audience. Pamela, a 31-year-old former airline stewardess, saw two people in Audie. The hero crowned with glory, and the man tormented by demons. And unlike everyone else, she didn't back down. Pamela Murphy provided a unique insight that the public never saw. Audie carried invisible wounds that never healed. He would wake up screaming, reliving battles from 20 years ago, but he never stopped trying to help other veterans. The war never ended for Audie, but he managed to turn his pain into a life's purpose. For 20 years, Pamela was by his side. She became his anchor, his personal field modification, against the chaos raging in his own mind. She helped him raise 2 sons. She steadfastly endured his night terrors. She supported all his activities. She was the chief of staff for a hero who was still fighting his war. Then, on May 28, 1971, the unthinkable happened. Audie Murphy, the man who had survived every imaginable horror of war. The man who, statistically, should have died 20 times on that burning tank, passed away at the age of 45, not in combat, but in a private plane crash in the mountains of Virginia during a storm. America mourned its greatest hero, but for Pamela Murphy, the real mission was just beginning. Audie had dedicated his life to fighting for his friends. Now Pamela would spend the rest of her life fighting for him. She had seen the fatal flaw of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, up close for 20 years, and now she was going to fix it. After Audie's death in 1971, the world discovered another shocking missing page of his story. The most decorated soldier in American history, a man who became a Hollywood star, died in debt. Poor investments and incompetent management by others left his estate and his wife, Pamela, with virtually nothing. She found herself a 50-year-old widow with 2 teenage sons to raise and a mountain of her late husband's debts. This was her personal Colmar Pocket. This was her unbearable situation, from which there seemed no escape. The world expected her to disappear, becoming just a tragic footnote in a hero's story. But they forgot who she truly was. She was the woman who stood by Audie Murphy for 20 years, facing his demons head-on. She was a warrior in her own right, and now she had a new mission. Audie's war was over. Hers was just beginning, and she was ready for it. She did something that defied all expectations. She didn't write a tell-all book. She didn't sell his medals. Instead, Pamela Murphy, the widow of America's greatest hero, walked into the Sepulveda Veterans Hospital in Los Angeles and asked for a job. She didn't ask for a high-ranking position. She didn't use her famous name as leverage. She took a job as a simple patient liaison clerk, starting from the ground up. This was her piano wire fix. This was her climbing onto the burning tank in a new battle. For the next 35 years, Pamela Murphy dedicated her life to Audie's other war, the war for those the system had forgotten. Every morning she came to the hospital, sat at her small desk, and became a one-woman army for veterans whom no one else would listen to. She was the mechanic who saw the fatal flaw in the massive and unwieldy system. She saw veterans broken by Vietnam, suffering from the same combat fatigue that haunted her husband. She saw them get lost in the labyrinths of bureaucracy. Their cases were lost, their benefits denied, their appointments cancelled. These men were the living ghosts of her husband, and Pamela Murphy was not going to abandon them. She became their tireless advocate. She was the piano wire in the broken control cable of the entire Veterans Affairs system, restoring its functionality. She used her quiet dignity and the profound moral authority that her name carried to cut through impenetrable bureaucracy. When a doctor refused to see a veteran, she would call and insist. When a benefit check was lost in the mail, she would find it, no matter what. When a bureaucrat told a veteran a firm no, Pamela Murphy would walk into their office and wouldn't leave until that no turned into a resolute yes. She treated every veteran, from the forgotten homeless soldier in the hallway to decorated colonels, with the same unwavering respect. In each of them, she saw her husband's face, his pain, his unbearable struggle, and she continued his work. When everything around you seems to be crumbling, and you're just a small grain of sand facing a huge, uncontrollable force, what then? When every step forward feels meaningless and doubts whisper, you're too small, too weak to change anything. Do you know that feeling when the world presses in from all sides and you wonder, is this the end? We've all been in such situations when there seemed to be no way out, but today we'll tell you how even in the most desperate circumstances you can not just endure but win by using hidden opportunities and unexpected solutions. How is this possible, you ask? And what if I told you that even your seeming weakness can become your most powerful weapon? In this video, we will uncover 4 incredible factors that transformed a hopeless situation into a legend that changed the course of history. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. In the stories of great deeds, behind the names of heroes often stand those who carry their legacy through the years. Pamela, Audie Murphy's widow, became not just the guardian of his memory, but a living embodiment of his unfinished mission. Her life, like the most powerful field modification, continued his work, symbolizing an unwavering promise. Leave no one behind. The name Audie L. Murphy, immortalized in 1973 with the dedication of the Audie L. Murphy Memorial Veterans Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, is undoubtedly important. But it was Pamela, through her 35 years of service, who became the true, tangible monument to his heroic spirit. However, this magnificent legacy, this decades-long mission, found its strength only thanks to one incredible event that unfolded on that frozen battlefield. It leaves behind one burning question. How? How did a 19-year-old, 110-pound boy with a leg wound manage to accomplish what seems impossible? It was neither a miracle nor a scene from a Hollywood blockbuster. It was a perfect storm, a confluence of 4 unique factors. These formed the basis of what would later be called the piano wire fix, a combination of a brilliant mechanic, a fatal flaw, a seemingly stupid innovation, and as a result, a completely crazy outcome. Stay with us and watch until the end. We'd be especially grateful for a like and a subscription. And of course, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The first of these key factors, surprisingly, was the weapon itself. We're talking about the legendary 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun, John Browning's creation, which first appeared in 1980. Many experts call it the best heavy machine gun of World War II, and for good reason. Its 50 BMG round effortlessly penetrated an inch of armor plate, and each projectile fired carried truly destructive energy, capable of tearing a human body apart. This machine gun was incredibly reliable, never failing even in the harshest cold. In the hands of most soldiers, it would have been merely a terrifying means of suppressing the enemy. But in Audie Murphy's hands, it transformed into something else entirely. A surgeon's precise scalpel. He didn't fire thoughtlessly or at random. Every target was meticulously chosen. Murphy applied the cold, ruthless arithmetic he had honed since childhood, hunting rabbits in Hunt County. As Sergeant Wald later testified, he eliminated enemies with incredible accuracy, as if on a firing range. One short burst, one target. Saw a German. Eliminated a German. The weapon itself was flawless, but the man who wielded it was truly extraordinary. However, even the most powerful weapon needs an ideal position for its deployment, and this is where the second, equally astonishing factor comes into play. The second factor was the seemingly absurd location, a burning M10 tank destroyer. To the German soldiers, it was nothing short of a deadly trap. A walking bomb ready to explode at any moment. But for Murphy, this flaming wreck became the ideal McKenna's solution, an embodiment of brilliant tactical choice. He intuitively grasped the hidden nature of this machine. What Murphy understood, and his adversaries did not, was the specific way the M10 burned. This tank destroyer carried a colossal 100 liters of diesel fuel and 51 rounds of 76mm high explosive ammunition securely housed within its hull. The German 80mm shell had struck the fuel tank, not the ammunition compartment. Yes, the vehicle was a bomb, but its detonator was working extremely slowly. Furthermore, the thick, impenetrable black smoke billowing from the diesel fire provided perfect concealment, a kind of smoke screen. The Germans were well aware that fire was coming from somewhere within that smoke, but they couldn't get a clear shot at the man hidden inside it. Murphy, in essence, fought from within a flaming fortress that, as he well knew, could blow up at any second. It was an act bordering on madness, yet simultaneously a display of tactical genius. However, even within such a fortress, one man alone couldn't stop an entire army without the third most powerful factor, which many overlook. The third, and perhaps most underestimated factor, was the so-called force multiplier. This crucial detail is often overlooked when discussing Murphy's heroic deed. He wasn't just a lone soldier fighting in the field. He transformed into an entire fire control center, concentrated in one man. While firing his .50 caliber with one hand, he held a field telephone to his ear with the other. He called in fire from his 105mm howitzers, located miles away. In doing so, he amplified his firepower literally thousands of times over. German soldiers weren't just fleeing from Murphy's machine gun bursts, they were escaping from the sky exploding above them, from a deluge of fire precisely directed by the man hidden in the plumes of smoke. It was this circumstance, ultimately, and at the most desperate moment, that led to his legendary command, "Fire on my position." He was prepared to sacrifice himself to use his last and most powerful weapon, artillery, to fully complete the task. But even with such a force multiplier, remaining unharmed in the hell of battle is more than just tactics. This brings us to the fourth, most critical factor. Finally, the fourth and most decisive factor was the hunter himself. Military analysts later attempted to calculate the odds of survival in that situation, considering the enemy's strength: 250 infantrymen, 6 tanks, and continuous machine gun and mortar fire. By the most conservative estimates, over 10,000 rounds were fired at Murphy's position during that hour. Statistical models relentlessly predicted he should have sustained 15 to 20 hits. However, he was hit only once, and that was by a fragment from an exploding shell. This wasn't merely luck or blind chance. It was a manifestation of extraordinary skill, honed since childhood as a Texas rabbit hunter. He instinctively understood how to remain unseen, how to blend with the terrain. He had internalized the primary principle: one shot, one kill. He himself admitted that in that moment, he transformed into a true killing machine. But what drove this machine? What was the true nature of his motivation? The answer to this question lies in a deep analysis of combat psychology. Dr. Dave Grossman, a recognized expert in the field of combat psychology, offered a profound analysis of this phenomenon. Murphy, he asserted, represented a perfect storm of human qualities. He combined technical skills honed through hunting, powerful motivation born of poverty, emotional detachment resulting from early trauma, and, most importantly, an unwavering protective instinct toward his comrades in arms that surpassed even his own instinct for self-preservation. He did not fight for America's abstract ideals. He did not seek personal glory. He fought for his friends, for those who were with him in the trenches. This profound motive leads us to understand the true significance and long-term impact of his valor. Such is the story of a seemingly insane act that, against all odds, changed the course of the war. It's the story of a small boy whom the Marines deemed too fragile and rejected. The story of the fatal flaw of a 110-pound kid who ultimately became a truly hidden weapon for the United States Army. This was the ultimate piano string fix, where climbing onto a burning tank led to an utterly unimaginable, crazy outcome, stopping an entire German army. His true legacy, His immense impact on the world has two facets. First, he forever broke the stigma associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, for it was Audie Murphy, America's greatest hero, who openly admitted that the ghosts of war haunted him. This gave thousands of other veterans invaluable permission for the first time. They felt they could seek help. He allowed them to simply be human with their fears and pain. But there is another, equally important facet to his legacy. The second facet is Pamela Murphy. She continued to work at that same Veterans Affairs hospital until she was 87, retiring only in 2007. She never remarried, remaining faithful to her husband's memory. When she passed away in 2010, she was buried next to him on the hallowed ground of Arlington National Cemetery. Thus, the mechanic was reunited with her pilot. The world saw Audie Murphy as a hero, the embodiment of courage. Pamela, however, saw him as a man, with all his weaknesses and strengths. Recruiters, in their time, saw only a fatal flaw, a failure to meet standards. The army, with its foresight, found a secret weapon in him. The Germans faced what seemed like an utterly unbearable situation. Audie Murphy, however, saw it only as a problem that needed solving. And all of this ultimately comes down to one undeniable fact. What makes this story the greatest overlooked page of World War II? A 110-pound farm boy who was too small to be a soldier by ordinary standards, transformed into the man who stopped an entire army to save his friends. And by performing this feat, he and the woman who loved him selflessly saved thousands of other lives, long after the cannons of war fell silent.